Hey everyone, it's Kong again with another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews to help you decide whether this new banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals. This month's banner is for the new mobile storyline protagonists, Prescia and Roland. As usual, any SSR you pull has a 40% chance of being either of them, with the remaining 20% chance reserved for any random off-banner in the regular summoning pool, including Gerald and Layla, who are still excellent for top-scoring Jormungandr runs. Alright, let's get things started with Prescia. Prescia is a physical bruiser. At the end of her action, she can either choose to have all of her buffs, debuffs, and skill cooldowns reduce by an extra 1, or have them not reduce at all. Fun little situational decision-making mechanic. After the third turn, if she ends an action in the danger zone, she also gets a revive. Her 3-cost skill is a 2-range, single-target, 1.8 times damage skill that lets melee soldiers attack and strips 5 buffs from the enemy before combat. Pretty standard stuff at this point, just adding range into the mix now. If this fails to kill the target, she reverts back to her state before taking action, similar to SP Matthew's time travel rewind trick. Her unique 1C is an assist that speeds up the cooldown of a skill that an ally uses. So you use it on an ally and they get a little buff, and then when they use a skill within that turn, their cooldown speeds up. And as a bonus, it boosts Prescia's mobility by 2. If she uses this skill on Roland, they both get an additional random buff. Her unique 2C is another single target attack, this one inflicting a neat debuff that causes the target's buffs to tick down faster. Something you can potentially use to surprise your opponents with, if your opponents are capable of feeling surprise, aka not the AI-controlled PvE enemies. Anyway, you get the idea. She's a member of Protagonists, buffed by Matthew and Emperor Lovina, Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizaroff, Sage of the Trees, and Isolde, and Princess Alliance, buffed by Luna, Shelfaniel, and Christiane. For bonds, she unlocks the defensive bonds for Andriao, a powerful upcoming DPS used in PvP. For her own bonds, she needs Lana for her defensive bond and Leon for her attack bond. For content, in PvE she's on faction for Leviar and Phoenix in the Eternal Temple, probably more useful for Phoenix because she can help tick down those flaming debuffs. She's also on faction for Hugin and Munin, Fenrir and Needhog in Ancient Beckoning. Maybe she would be interesting against Needhog or H&M because she'll always get the rewind from her 3C. The hard part with AB is figuring out who to drop. On the PvP side, she hasn't gotten much use in PvP to date, but that may change with the upcoming release of the new Mythical Realm faction buffer Isolde, as well as some assistance from a casting passive and some personal equipment. It doesn't look like she brings a lot to the table other than hit thing hard, but if we're entering a tank annihilating meta, as some people seem to think, maybe that's just what the doctor ordered. For her build, she's going to want the usual bruiser stuff. Ragnarok, defensive armor of choice, Fury of Tyr or Aeneas Helm, and either bulk or mobility accessory depending on how you want to use her. Breeze for assault, Full Moon for bulk lords. Alright, up next we've got Roland. Roland is a magical boy with a class switching gimmick that gives him different perks depending on what his current class is, or more accurately his current class-related talent buff. When he's holy, he starts with a talent buff that gives him additional defense and dispels 2 buffs from the target when he attacks. When he's a mage, he starts with a talent buff that gives him +2 skill range and applies 2 debuffs to the target when he attacks. So what's all this starting with buff stuff? Here's where things are about to get fun for people who like whack mechanics. His unique 1C is a transformation skill that swaps these 2 buffs, so if he had the holy buff, now he has the mage buff. It also gives him +20% int for 2 turns, or 4 turns if Prescia is also on your team, and it gives him a 2-block act again. His unique 2C is his DPS. If he currently has the holy talent buff, it's a single target attack, and if he currently has the mage talent buff, it's a line AoE that scrambles enemy positions. His 3C is obviously also split up like this. The holy version is another single target range spell that strips a few buffs before battle, and if the target has 2 debuffs, it lets Roland attack first. The mage version is a 0.36 times AoE that inflicts one lonely debuff and gives him a 20% damage dealt buff if it hits 3 or more enemies. Both his unique 2C and his 3C refresh their cooldowns when you switch forms. He's a member of Protagonists, buffed by Matthew and Emperor Lovina, Legion of Glory, buffed by Ledin, Elwyn, and Grenier, and Yeles Legends, buffed by Landius and Sigma. For bonds, he unlocks the defensive bond for Nymea, a powerful upcoming DPS used in PvP. He needs Listel for his own defensive bond, and Landius for his attack bond. For content, in PvE he's on faction for Phoenix and Scylla in the Eternal Temple, and Hugin and Munin and Needhog in Ancient Beckoning, but I don't see him being all that compelling in either of those fights. I similarly don't see him being all that compelling in PvP. His overcomplicated form-swapping kit paints over the fact that neither form really has fantastic skills. So the main benefit is being able to swap Act Again to refresh cooldowns on mediocre skills every couple turns. For his build, he'll most likely want Gift of Eternal Life for some incidental healing, yes, he's that kind of unit, and Breeze, and the rest is dealer's choice. Alright, let's start wrapping things up here with the notes for noobs. Prescia is a fairly one-dimensional unit who can output a lot of sustained big damage. She doesn't look too special right now, but the upcoming Mythical Realm faction buffer Isolde, a new casting passive, and some new personal gear might tip the scales. The main thing to mention here is that she's a bond unlocker for Andriao, and he's getting a lot of PvP use. Definitely going to want to secure her if you plan to have an up-to-date Apex box in a couple of months. Grolon is a multi-dimensional unit who doesn't really have too much impact in either of those dimensions. As with Prescia though, he's a bond unlocker for Nymea, and she's getting a lot of PvP use as well. So definitely going to want to secure him if you plan to have an up-to-date Apex box in a couple months. One final thing to mention here, we don't know for sure, but either of these characters could also very well be a bond unlocker for Isolde. Protagonists eventually becoming bond unlocking machines is usually a pretty safe bet. Finally, my usual note about upcoming banners. Next week we'll get a Polyal and Michelle banner, plus the routine Langrisser 1, 2, and 3 wishlist. The next week we should get a McLean, Omega, and Tsubame Meteor Strike banner, plus the routine Langrisser 4 and 5 wishlist. On the final week of the update, we should get an Azusa, Mew, and Kruger banner, plus the old Landius, Yulia, and Juglar banner. And a fantastic Macho Lotto skin for Ed Ankelmo. I don't usually go in for skins, but hot damn, this one is hitting the right Transcender vibe for me. It's just in the middle of a horrible stretch to spend a whole bunch of crystals on something like a skin. We've got some summoning to do in the future, my friends. Next month's update will be the long-awaited Slayers collab featuring Lina Inverse and Blue Cat Mage, along with the completely free Gowry. Initial hype for Lina was high, but she's already starting to dwindle out of Chinese boxes. This is the great thing about Future Sight. Chinese players didn't know they were about to get a sequence of OP banners that would almost immediately power creep all this stuff. We'll talk about Lina more in her own episode, but she'll be a hot item for collectors at the very least. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I want future bonds and future apexing, so I'll be trying to summon one of each. But if the worst comes to the worst, there's a whale bag coming for the anniversary, or around there anyway. So we could whale for the one we miss. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I wish you all the best of luck in your summoning, and I will catch you in the next Should You Summon. Extra special thanks, of course, to our Langrisser tier channel members for generously supporting the channel directly. Shout out to Levitt, Kate Soon, Jared Portela, Jerome Meyer, and Harambe, and special final shout out to Righteous Freed, who has departed from this mortal coil and will be heard from no more. We're all gonna miss him. It's gonna be 4 degrees tonight. That's cold.